it's about really ensuring that you have good, solid, and conservative underwriting on the projects that you're doing.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to Pillars of Wealth Creation. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me, excited to have Aaron Yassin. Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Aaron's with Hive Developers, and look, Aaron started kind of like a lot of us start. He started in New Jersey, just purchasing properties, undervalued market of downtown Jersey City. First a condo, sold, which was actually, Aaron, that was recently sold, or how long ago did you sell that?
Fairly recently sold.
Fairly recently.
Yeah, I could dig into that a little bit too. It's a unique.
So anyways, just started kind of small and started 1031 exchanging, and now really has grown into a design-driven development firm that's got, you got over 20 years of real estate experience in the New York City area. So I love it. I want to hear more. Let's dive in. Tell me about your background. We kind of started a little bit, but let's go. How did you start? And now what are you doing today?
Okay, that's a great question, because I have a somewhat of a unique background getting into the real estate space. I'm actually an artist by training, by education, and by passion. I went to undergraduate school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and then I also have a master's degree in fine art.
You're the first artist I've ever had on my podcast. So
fantastic. So it's good. It's always good to have people doing different things coming from different places. So when we can dig into that a little bit, because there's certainly a lot of connection in terms of what I'm doing and what I talk about. But from a real estate standpoint, one of the things that artists are always looking for is space, a visual artist. So always looking for studio space. And of course, always trying to look for some place to live as well. So, and there are other artists that I know that have also, figured out that they could purchase a building and have a studio space in it. And it's led to a few of them kind of getting into real estate through that avenue, trying to basically, because, prices go up constantly for studio spaces. And if there's a way you can actually purchase the real estate, just like other, owner operator businesses, where that can add value to your business, that has been an approach. So the second property that I purchased, I actually had my art studio in the building, and the guys that I was renting from came to me one day and said, we're actually thinking about selling the building. And I felt like I was in a position where there weren't a lot of other spaces around, and I had already gotten set up. So I took it as an opportunity to kind of negotiate directly with them. But I had already started looking at real estate, and I purchased another property prior to that. And there has been, in addition to that, my grandfather, who was in the Boston area, had some smaller multifamily, so he had some investments in real estate as well. My father was in a different field entirely, but had always encouraged me to look at property to purchase, because he understood, based on what his father had done, the value in doing it.
How did you finance those first deals? Was it you're making enough money to get regular financing, or?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So this first property that I purchased was a really fascinating story. So I'd moved up to New York City, and there was another kind of development that was going on that was going to happen in Jersey City, which actually never came to fruition. But it got me looking at Jersey City, which is, people don't know, it's just across the Hudson River from Manhattan, and there is a separate subway system that takes you from New Jersey right into Manhattan. It's incredibly convenient. So I went over to downtown Jersey City and started looking for apartments, basically apartments to rent. And unlike New York at the time, in Jersey, they had a multiple listing service. So actually, believe it or not, in New York City, that did not exist at the time. It still doesn't exist, but of course, there's tech that's taken over it. So I'm sitting in a realtor's office who's going to take me around and show me some apartments to rent, most of which were not great. He was on the phone talking about some deal, and there was a little MLS booklet right there next to me. So I picked it up and started flipping through it, right, while I was waiting, and noticed that there were some condos just exactly in the same location where I was looking to rent, that were incredibly reasonably priced. And, I could quickly do a calculation in my head that I could buy one of these apartments basically for the same amount of money it's going to cost me to rent an apartment. And when I say that, I mean, to rent, to get into the rental at the time was, there's a broker fee, which comes and goes in New York sometimes. Then at that time, it was their broker fee, first month's rent, security deposit, and potentially last month's rent, right? So I had all of those possible fees, about $5,000.
Wow.
Just to get into
Just to get in.
Yeah, the apartments were about $1,000, which now seems incredibly reasonable. But then didn't seem so reasonable, but wasn't terrible for what I was looking at. So, but that was going to be approximately my cost. And as I'm looking at these potential apartments to purchase, it was obvious I could buy one for about $5,000 down.
Wow.
So based on the price. So I thought, well, why don't I just look at a couple of apartments? I have tended to take action, and this is certainly an important lesson. So that most people should take heed of. I looked at a few apartments and I just picked one and I said, all right, I'll take it. I'll pay the full asking price. It seemed really reasonable. And then, at the time you could add some additional amount if you could get it appraised to cover your closing costs. So I actually ended up closing on the apartment for a little bit less than I would have probably paid to rent an apartment in terms of what the money was out of pocket. And I ended up with a better apartment that then, from a carrying cost standpoint, cost me less monthly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the rent continued to increase where your payments don't. Now your taxes, insurance, and certainly those do, but
yeah, well, they actually on the this is funny too that Jersey City was supposed to reevaluate the taxes for a long time, and they didn't do it until about 5 or 6 years ago. So the taxes were incredibly low for a long time. But what that allowed me to do too was, since I got into the apartment, and at the time, I will say there was probably a little bit of luck going on because people were moving back into cities, and prices started going up at the time. This was around 2000, so there was appreciation fairly quickly, and this wasn't leading up to 2007 and 8. It was still easier to get to qualify for certain types of mortgages. So not long after I purchased it, I was able to get a HELOC on it, and then that gave me some money that I could utilize for other purposes. So that was how I got into the first purchase. And the second purchase was more expensive, and it required a little bit more down. And I had a little bit of money that I was able to use for that. And, my parents did help me out just with the down payment for that property. So kind of a combination from there. And then fairly quickly, there was a lot of appreciation, and there was equity that I was able to pull out of the two properties.
Yeah. Let's fast forward then to the kind of what you're doing today. So explain to our audience what your company's focus is today, what your ideal acquisition looks like and project looks like, and then we can dive into the details.
Okay, terrific. So currently we are focused on ground up condominium development in Brooklyn. And this literally does mean ground up. So we're purchasing properties, and there's a demolition requirement at the beginning. So we're demolishing older buildings, and then starting from the ground up, which would include excavation and foundation work, of course. And we're building residential, so they're multifamily. Currently, we're building just condominiums. There's opportunities, I think, in some rental spaces, but it's a different type of underwriting doing rentals.
So with your condo projects, you're selling each individual unit, so you're not holding on to anything.
Yes, that's correct. So gotcha. the exit for our projects is to sell individual units, and then to break that down a little bit from looking at the mechanics of it. You've got the acquisition, the land acquisition, And so that's, whatever price you're able to negotiate. And then, you need to obviously put the numbers together in the right way, which I can just run over very quickly. So you've got that is a line item in your uses. We could back up for a second. When you're underwriting the project like this, you've got sources, which is where the money's coming from, and then uses, where you're using the money. And so with a new development project, you've got land acquisition, hard costs, soft costs, contingency. This is just very basic. I'll give you basic line items, and then interest reserve and closing costs. And then for sources, there's some different ways of doing it. We're now syndicating our projects, so that would include then bringing in passive investors to partner with us and invest alongside of us. But it's possible where from the capital stack is where all the money's coming from, right? So you're of course going to have what's called senior debt. So that would be a construction loan on the project, and then there would be a portion of general partner equity. This would be in a syndication, and then some limited partner equity. Right. If it's for example, if you're doing a smaller project, or if it was just say a gut renovation, it could be possible to do it just with, some general partner or just the partner's equity, and then getting a construction loan or a fix and flip loan, sometimes referred to as bridge loans. So that's kind of the typical structure. And then from an underwriting standpoint, obviously that has to fit into a total equation where, your costs are of course overcome and exceeded significantly by, what the sales numbers are. Right. And there's a lot of components within that we could dive into, whatever you'd like to.
So why ground up? That's not how you started. Why ground up versus, buying existing, converting, that why did you have you decided ground up? And I guess also real quick, what size kind of condo are we doing? You're in Brooklyn, doing a lot of stuff in Brooklyn. So what size are we doing?
Right. That's a very good question. So a typical one bedroom is going to be around 600 square feet.
Okay. And how many units are in a building typically?
Yeah, well, currently we have two properties, two projects that we're working on. One has 8 units, although they are smaller units. There's more one bedrooms in that project. And then there's another project that has 10 units, and we have larger apartments in that building. So that one ranges from around a 600 square foot one bedroom to a 1,350 square foot 3-bedroom, 3-bath. So we've got more variety of unit types in that building. And that would be a typical range, depending on, this is all, underwriting specific. Where are you? What does it make sense to build? There's a market analysis from the local market, and then an exit analysis, as well as some different things that make sense to look at. And then also in terms of the opportunity that you have with the site, what can you actually build? So it's a significant number of factors to figure out what the best unit mix is in a project.
Okay, so back to my original question: why ground up? Why not existing?
So there's a couple of reasons for it. One is there's a kind of a primary thesis that we have at Hive, which is that we're design driven developers, and our goal is to build better buildings and to utilize what can be done today. The kind of understanding we have of how to build a better building and some of the technology that's available to do that, and also bring our design background to the work that we're doing. So it allows us to combine our core strengths. My partner is a general contractor, and he's focused on doing ground up projects. So he's really bringing that experience to the table. And then I'm bringing a lot of operations and design and aesthetic thinking to the projects as well. And we're kind of combining our core strengths. And we have a couple of other team members that are also working on the kind of the technology and investor relations components of the work. So it's about what we believe that we can do, and where we can really create a significant amount of value. And we have the operational experience to do it, and we have what I like to think is a vision for a certain model of what can be built and how that's a superior product, and that's really needed in the market.
Yeah. Yeah. Every market is different, and you've identified what's needed in the market and what fits your area of expertise. And, with
Exactly.
your art background, probably works really well in that design build situation. And obviously your partner being a ground up developer definitely fits well into that situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think a lot of people think like they think of New York City. We're talking New York City here, and they're like, man, how do you make any profit in New York City? Things are so expensive in New York City. Like what is an 8-unit condo cost to build?
Yeah, that's a great question. But I'll step back on that question for a moment and just say that it really it's all about the underwriting in any
Yeah.
project,
In
right?
any market too, the cheapest market or the most expensive market, which you're in maybe one of, if
One of the
not
most,
the most
yes.
expensive market.
So it's about really ensuring that you have good, solid, and conservative underwriting on the projects that you're doing. And as you're just saying, any project that anyone's working on anywhere needs to be underwritten in the best way possible and with accurate assumptions. And there are projects that can fail in what seem like the greatest markets, and there's projects that can do well in markets where someone might say to you, how can you possibly invest in, maybe you hear that sometimes with some of your markets, Louisville, Kentucky, or Cincinnati. How can, those aren't markets that people generally talk about as the hottest, fastest growing market. So
Right.
if you really look at what you're doing and you understand what, where the numbers should be at and where you can get to and where your risk factors are, and you can underwrite the project accurately and conservatively, there's still definitely good upside for what we're doing. And it's also market specific, right? We're not building rentals because, in New York, there's been tax incentive programs for doing rental projects, and there isn't one at the moment. And that makes those types
Hmm.
of projects more
Interesting.
challenging. There's a lot of these factors in all markets that you really need to look at and understand, what's the best thing that you can do. So just, looking at the numbers specifically, we're building in our market somewhere between about $300 and $400 price per square foot, which is
Wow.
certainly going to sound higher than in most markets, but we're also building a different kind of building. And there's a number of reasons why we have to build a different building in New York. A lot of it has to do with the codes, but it's also based on what our goals are of what we want to build. So you're looking at that's your hard cost. So let's say 300, right? Which would be, if you can get it, a really good number. And from an acquisition cost standpoint, prices will range from, in undervalued markets, maybe you can find something in the 100 to $150 price per buildable square foot. So you look at a
Yeah.
site.
And yeah, how much your building can be, not how much the site
Exactly.
is. Right.
Exactly. And there's an equation for that. So you determine, what that is, and then that's going to drive your acquisition cost. So that could start at, say, between $100 and $150 price per square foot. And then, of course, when you move into Manhattan markets, you're looking at where, people would expect very, very high numbers. I mean, there have been trades that have gone for, well over $1,000 price per buildable square
Wow.
foot.
Wow.
So some
Oh,
very high numbers. And
that's
obviously,
amazing. So that's actually more of what I expected you to say, because even here, in Minneapolis, if you're going to buy something, do a condo conversion, you're probably all in that 300 to 400 per square foot,
including all your construction costs.
including all your construction costs,
Yeah,
your
right.
total costs. Of course, it depends on your level of finishes and all that kind of stuff. But,
Of course, of course.
we're seeing a condo type product be that, that price. So it's
Yeah,
not crazy far off
right.
of where
But
you're at, and
that's not that cheap. That's
it's
a
not cheap.
little higher than I was expecting.
I mean,
Although,
certainly you can get in a little bit less depending on the market you're in and all that,
right, right.
um, but yeah, it's
It,
and your profit margins are likely, or your sale price is likely quite a bit higher in Brooklyn than I
Certainly.
would
So
expect.
between the two projects that we're working on, we're going to expect exit price per square foot there's another equation that goes on there, and there's a whole, whole story behind how you then get to that a number, the actual square foot that you're selling. But we're expecting prices, let's say between 900 on the low end, and then at 1,050. Maybe we'll get a sale in one of the buildings at closer to 1,100. That's about where this market is. In for the Brooklyn market, for on the low end for new condo development, you might be able to find something in the $700 to $800 price per square foot, and then it can go up to 1,800, 2,000, 2,200. In there's some couple of neighborhoods like Dumbo and Williamsburg, where the numbers are high, and actually higher than in quite a few neighborhoods in Manhattan. There's a lot of, Brooklyn's really had an amazing renaissance in the last 20 years, and there's some neighborhoods that are just actually more desirable than some Manhattan neighborhoods, with good reason, actually.
I got one final question in the New York specific, and then I want to dive into some other stuff. But I got to know, like, how long does it take you to develop a 8 or 10 unit condo, start to finish, like the day you purchase that property, all the way to the day that you sell the last condo? What's your time horizon there?
That's a fantastic question, because that's also where some of the risk factors come in, right? Yeah. And there's different perceived risks, and it's really in any place that you're building. One of the big risks is, how long does it take you to get your plans approved? So if you can get your plans approved in a reasonable amount of time, and of course there's an operational component of the process also, you need to stay on top of all the details, and there's a lot of details. And so there's a certain experience level that comes into that. Many different details, many different filings, and different approvals. But if you can stay on top of it, for the larger project that we're working on, we're expecting to be fully exited in about 30 months from the point of acquisition. So we closed on it in early January. I'm still optimistic we'll be basically done with construction sometime next year in the fall. We're about to start demolition imminently. We've got the plans approved at this point. Since it's a new building, it's a different demolition application here that's been approved. So we're just at the point where we're really ready to get moving, and then we'll try to move as quickly as possible, of course. So that one we hope to get out of in about 30 months. The other project has taken longer from the plan approval process standpoint. So it can take longer, and depending on certain factors. And then also, if you have a much larger project, there should be a reasonable expectation that it's going to just take longer to just sell all the units. Yeah. So you could, 36 months is not unreasonable. If you had, let's say, 12 to 15, 20 units as on the low end. And then it could take, there's projects that have taken a couple of years to sell out that have 80, 90, 100, 120 units. Obviously, it's just, more inventory to sell. So that's unless you run into some unusual problem, which does happen, and this happens in all markets, that would be a normal period of time. And of course, the faster you can get the project done, the better the project does, because time is expensive.
Yeah, and actually not as bad as I would have expected. I was expecting to hear you say that the approval process in New York was going to take a lot longer. Just thinking of what a big bureaucracy in the city, and just the hurdles that a lot of these big cities can put up can become very onerous. And so now that's probably something that anybody listening, whether you're developing in New York City or in Cleveland, Ohio, or whatever, it doesn't matter where you're developing, you got to understand that what the process is to get your project through. And Absolutely. That the first time, it's probably going to take you a lot longer than it will as you become an expert at it. You guys likely have everything in place and are ready to hit the ground running with the city, where the first time you're kind of fumbling through things a little bit.
Absolutely. And the issue is that you don't know what you don't know. So you may not know what questions to ask, and certainly things come up in the process. And then, things change over time also. The few years ago, the Department of Buildings created this whole online system for filing, and it's very glitchy. There's problems all the time. We're dealing with an IT problem that they're trying to resolved. And it takes, that's where there's real bureaucracy in it. So there can be a very streamlined path, and then there can be, some zigs and zags. But I've talked to people that are working in other markets also, and some markets, yes, it's much quicker. But I was surprised to find out that, for example, in the Austin, Texas area, it takes forever to get plans approved there.
Yeah.
I spoke to a pretty large multifamily developer a couple of weeks ago, and he said he has one project there that he's at somewhere between 3 and 4 years getting his project approved.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
that's excessive. Like, I've never,
Yeah.
there are projects in New York that have taken that long, but they tend to have unique conditions to them. Maybe they're in a historical district, or there's some other
Yeah.
aspect of the project that requires more layers. We do get things done a little bit faster here, although everyone complains, and they always say it's getting worse. If you ask anyone, like,
I think
oh,
that's
it's
human
getting worse.
nature.
It's getting worse. Although the
No,
plan
it's just
set,
getting different, and you don't want to adjust it. That's usually what it truly is. It's not getting worse. It's just different, and you don't want to adjust to the new different. So
right. So you have to stay on it. It's not
yeah.
like it's always going to be the same. And there are more requirements now. The plan sets are very long. I mean, it's
Yeah.
remarkable. We've got, I would say in total 80, 90 sheets between all of the different drawing sets, where it
Wow.
used to be not long ago, maybe 25, 30 sheets.
Yeah.
There's a huge energy section. There's more details required on building envelope, lots of different aspects of the projects. There's just more information that's required.
Yeah. Understanding those changes is important. Let's talk about growing your business and what you've done to scale. Maybe let's talk about, I don't know, go pick out like 3 kind of key things that you have done in order to go from, the first beginnings of buying those condos to now developing and to where your company is right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. And my path has not been linear in any way.
It
So
never is.
never is. Maybe mine's a little less linear, because I've done some different types of work, and I think that this could be helpful for people listening, because a lot of people look at real estate as a way, like, how can I get out of my W-2 job, or I want to shift to something else. I'm looking for some passive income. I would say that maybe, unlike some other people that are looking at real estate for the so-called freedom angle, I really like what I do, and I'm not trying to put myself in a position where I only need to work 4 hours a week, and then I can sit on the beach. I want to build more buildings of a certain type, based on a certain kind of mission. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But how did I get from just buying some existing properties and then moving into the development space? So the third property that I purchased, I was looking with, I had some friends that were interested in potentially going in on something. It's New York, so things are expensive. So, that's a conversation that people that are looking often have. And we were looking initially for a loft building that we could convert into kind of live work artist loft spaces, which was definitely something that appealed to me at the time. I wanted a great studio. And during that process of looking, we ended up finding a building that it wasn't going to be that type of building, but it was in a great location. And I was kind of, ready to go either way. I liked the idea of really investing in a great location where there was some opportunity to kind of develop the property. So that appealed to me at that time, even though I was kind of too dumb to know what I didn't know, and how complicated and challenging it would be. And that project, unlike some of those other, those earlier investments, it took a long time to really, and deal with, and there were a lot of challenges involved. But we did ultimately develop the air rights, and the location proved to be absolutely extraordinary. And the return on the investment over time, from a pure dollar standpoint, was what I was hoping it would be. It just took longer. It was a much longer process, but I knew that if I could just dig into it and put the time in, that it would do that. And it was great that kind of thesis worked out. And then once completing that project, it really got this itch, I just, the idea of being able to really create something, as an artist, I make things and I make lots of different things. And so, creating a building it seemed like kind of the ultimate thing to make. And my work itself is very focused on architecture, and a strong interest in architecture and again, the process of fabrication and building. And then at that same time, I had a job working as a studio director for an artist and designer. And in that capacity, we worked with dozens of architects and interior designers on very complex projects, integrating kind of decorative art elements or public art, or in certain fixtures. We did work for Tiffany and Company for many years, delivered probably 1,000 chandeliers and wall sconces that were custom to stores all over the world. So that gave me a lot of experience just, in a process standpoint, and being in a position where there was a lot of complexity that was basically complexity of just inventing something. Like, where do you even start? How do you think about something? How are you going to make it? How does that even work? How does it fit into, everything else that you're working on? So there's definitely a lot of experience that I'm drawing from that position. And then, when there was an opportunity to kind of transition into doing different work, about 2018, and at the time I partnered with an architect, and we started doing some design work, and we actually won some awards for one of the projects that we worked on, and during that collaboration, my focus again shifted to thinking about originating development projects and how I could bring that mindset to that work. So this is kind of the zigzags in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. What's a daily habit, a routine that you have that you feel like sets you up?
That's a great question. I do like to exercise, and I like to do that in the morning. And I think that's really kind of a great way to kind of get my day going. I often run, and I like to listen to audiobooks and podcasts while I do that. I've listened to your podcast, the one that we're doing right now, while I'm working out. So I feel like that's a great way to, just really kind of supercharge as a daily habit.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely. I love doing a workout and listening to a podcast or an audible book. You kind of multitasking is maybe a terrible thing to do, but when you're listening to a podcast and you're working out, I feel like that's a good use of multitasking when we're actually able to maybe get a little bit of both done at the same time. So, what's a mistake that you have made, and how can you teach our listeners to learn from that?
Well, we've certainly, I myself personally, definitely made a good number of mistakes over the years. It kind of goes with the territory. There's so many different things and decisions that you need to make. One thing that I would point to, it's maybe a little bit more abstract, but it's just not asking all the right questions, not really digging into, maybe it's certain aspects of a project or a building that you might want to purchase that could be, not doing enough inspections, for example, and you might have missed something, not, some aspect of the due diligence process. And then also it can be before you make a purchase or after you make a purchase, just not thinking through where some of the costs might come into play, or what some contingencies are that you really should consider. And also being really clear on the exit strategy. I think that's definitely in some of the early investments that I got into. I didn't have an exit strategy, and I realize now that that was I should have had an exit strategy, and I would have been able to then feel like I one of the properties I owned, I waited too long to sell it. I should have sold it at 5 years, and I ended up selling it at closer to year 10. And between 5 and 10, it really didn't appreciate that much. So having, asking all the right questions, figuring out how to ask the right questions, getting enough information so you know what they are, because you may not know what they are. And there's a lot of available resources, and there's a lot of people that you can just network with that can help you understand what are the right questions to ask.
Yep.
And then really working from some actual materials, put together a spreadsheet and really try to think through everything. And then also from that, don't let it cripple you, because you're going to miss something, right? If you look at, you put all this on a spreadsheet, and like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. I'm missing something.
Yeah.
I can't do this, you know?
You're you're going to miss things. That's just how it is. There's no way around it. But I like the understanding your exit strategy too, and having it. And I think that goes with what's your overall business plan to, to grow and to move forward. But you need to understand your business plan on that particular asset and overall. Your exit strategy, quite frankly, could just be a refinance and hold. It could be
Absolutely.
a sale, but you have to understand. And I like exit strategies more on hitting key metrics than I do on dates as well. Because if I hit key metrics quicker, that allows me to sell it. Versus if I say I'm going to sell this building in 5 years, 3 years, 8 years, whatever that is, once I hit that, maybe I should have sold it in year 3, or maybe I should hold it for up until year 8.
Right.
But if I have metrics and even a time frame, I can massage that a little bit, and allows me to make maybe the best decision for that asset, for the business overall. So, but I like making sure you have that exit plan in place in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great approach, and and I really like it because it's kind of a nuanced approach. It's not just looking at it exactly as you're saying. We're gonna sell at this point. Well, maybe yes, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe there's something else to do with it. But establishing what those options could be that you're going to evaluate at a clear point in time, and then making a decision from there. That's very, very critical in the process.
Yep. I've made the emotional mistake. I don't know if you have, but I've made the emotional mistake of I have the business plan, I have my metrics, I have my time frame, and then all of a sudden I feel connected to this property. It's for some reason, and then I pivot, and I don't. And it seems like more often than not, when I pivot and I don't follow the metrics and I don't follow the reasons that we originally set up the plan, that it doesn't work in the end, and I end up being irritated that I made that choice.
Right. That's a really good a good story. Do you find that having partners helps you with that? They can kind of keep you on the right path. Like, say,
I do.
What are you thinking here?
Yeah,
Don't fall in love.
And that's why I think, have people talk so highly of having mentors is. And I feel like I've got 2 business partners. They're both my mentors as well. They're not, technically no, but yeah, they are, because we're communicating together all the time. We're talking about the plans that we want to be. So we're mentoring kind of each other. We're looking after our business. We're looking after each other. And so, yeah, having a partner or having 2 partners, or, it's just super valuable to be able to have that check and balance type system going on.
Absolutely. And because you're thinking about the investment in one way, and unlikely your partner's thinking about it in the same way. And even if you're asking similar questions, they're going to have a different perspective.
Yeah. We just recently decided to sell an asset, and I was the one that said, no, let's hold this thing, and they convinced me, and it wasn't stronghold. Like, they didn't tie me down and beat me to convince me. It was just good conversations. And I said, okay, yeah, that this does make sense. Let's do it. But if it would have been just me, I probably just would have held on to it. Now, with that property, probably wouldn't have been a mistake, but at the same time, I think now this is the best choice. And it was through that conversation that made that decision to happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just figuring out, who you need that can help you with that is really powerful.
Yeah. Aaron, I got a question back to the development. And this is more of a selfish question, because one of the things that we struggle with the most in our value add projects, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially today, but I think it's always a challenge, is cost overruns and time to completion. You've got a business partner that that's his area of expertise. So this is maybe a little bit outside of your box, but I want to understand what you guys, if there's any, secret sauce or anything special you feel like you are doing to make sure that you're controlling costs and controlling time on your completions.
Yeah, that's a great question, because those are really two slightly more abstract factors, right? Getting into a project that could really, cause a lot of downward pressure on your
It's a
exit numbers, right?
big derailment, especially on like a condo project like yours, where
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
depend on the numbers.
Absolutely. So, for me personally, thinking through that, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to find a general contractor that I could partner with. Because I understand where there are some risk factors there. Look, you got to be able to find someone that you can get along with, that you can trust, and that's critical. And that understands and has the right relationships, that's able to facilitate getting the work done. One issue with contractors, which you've possibly run into, is that when you're just hiring a contractor, you might expect a certain time frame of work to be done, and then they take on too many projects, and then you're kind of stuck, and they can't, they might hem and haw and say, like, tell you what you want to hear, but then it still ends up taking months longer. And that's really that it's going to cause you terrible problems. It's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, and that probably happens about 98.6% of the time.
Very, very, very typical. And I mean, I know other operators that are doing maybe heavy value add, or some new construction, and some of them have really tried to bring some of the work in-house also, to just get more control over it. I think if it's
Are
possible
you
to,
guys in-house, or are you using third party still?
well, for subcontractors, my partner has a general contracting license through an
Yeah.
affiliate
And then you're
business.
using
And
subcontractors.
yes, of course, you're going to have a
Yes.
lot of different subcontractors, and the more relationships you have with the subcontractors, the better off you're going to be, because that way you'll have someone else to call. You can get multiple bids. So developing those relationships, if this is, what you're going to want to, what you're interested in getting into, let's just say it's even a certain type of fix and flip, go out and talk to a lot of people that are doing the work, as many as you can, to start with, and look at their projects and understand what it is that they're doing. This is certainly, from my perspective with the construction and my fine art background, and having done a lot of manufacturing, I can look at work that people have done, and get a sense of where their quality level is at and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that ability, you find someone that most people
Mm-hmm.
will know someone that has some construction background or some construction experience,
Yeah.
and can then make some assessments based on the what the work looks like, and then develop relationships with, if you need a general contractor, maybe you're doing just smaller fix and flips, and you can just hire subs directly. Talk to a handful of subs for each different aspect of what you're doing. A plumber, an electrician. Develop a list of those people that you can call, because guaranteed one of them, even if it's the one you generally use, at some point he will not be available, and he may not be available for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and you can't sit around and
Yep.
wait if he's the guy that you want. So you need more resources. The more resourced you can be, the better. And I would say, the same thing in terms of, that's managing time with your contractor or your subcontractors, but also having different options can help you manage costs, because you'll get multiple bids for the work. And then by getting those bids, that can also give you an opportunity to assess costs differently. And this is just a very a nuanced part of the process. You might get a bid from someone that includes X, Y, and Z, and then you get a bid from someone else that just includes X. So maybe one price is higher, but it includes more. And is that work that you needed someone else to do? And then, what's the difference? So what are you really comparing? What are you really getting? What's the time frame? The more you're able to scrutinize, all of those different pieces, lots of small pieces, and put them together, then you're going to be able to best control cost and time. And it's a process of learning how to do it. And then on top of it, if you can actually control the money that's in the project as well, then you can see substantial differences there, in addition to those other differences. So there are aspects in the process where you can kind of borrow a little bit here or borrow a little bit here or just finesse it, and that can add to, you know, an additional 3% or 5% on your exit, or it can help if maybe the exit numbers are down slightly, so you still hit your target numbers. You know, you need to focus on all those details.
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts from the beginning and making sure that your budget numbers are actually accurate.
Absolutely.
That's probably all been our biggest challenge, is coming up with the budget and the budget being too light. And then you're always worried about the cost. And when you're worried about cost and you're trying to cut costs at every last corner, what happens is then the time frame starts to get longer and longer and longer, because you can't use the sub that you know would do a great job, you know would get it done on time, but it's going to cost too much. So you're
Right.
worried about the cost, and then the time ends up going longer, and that even costs you more money.
Right. You can end up spending more money in the
Yeah.
in the end, potentially. So
Yeah.
one I'll just add this as a final comment on it. There's a common metric which we've discussed earlier in the conversation about how to think about, you know, your cost, the price per square foot to build, right? But if you don't have some way of looking at that and assessing that kind of in-house with your own resources, and you just go out and talk to a contractor, right? Because I've seen this happen with so many different people. You know, they'll
Yeah.
talk to have a general conversation with a contractor and ask them, well, how much is it going to cost, kind of, you know, per square foot? Unfortunately, this is not a helpful question to ask in an
Mm-mm.
abstract way to a contractor, because they will have to give you a number that will absolutely cover whatever you throw at them when it gets more detailed. So they're not going to, you know, if you think, okay, it should cost $150 a price per square foot, and you go talk to the contractor, he might tell you 175 just to protect himself. Because if it comes back and he then looks at more detailed drawings and it's over the 150, then, you know, then he has a problem.
But he just
So
doesn't get the job.
and then you're left trying to bid that out
Yeah.
around, and you may or may not get it. It's
Yeah.
so again, having a better understanding of the process. So it's, what are you actually asking a contractor to bid? You know, if
Yeah.
you can know what your range is, include an appropriate range in your underwriting. And then when you're having conversations with the people doing the work, ask them things that are more specific. Like, here, we're going to do this, this, and this. This is what it looks like on the plans, and it's going to be done this way. Then they're looking at something specific. And then you ask them for, you know, a line item estimate for doing that work. And then it's not just this one big lump sum. And then
Right.
you can look at the line items and then really kind of scrutinize it. You want to start from a position where you're negotiating that in a more equal position, as opposed to
Absolutely.
giving the contractor like, oh yeah, $200, and maybe I can build it for that.
Yeah, yeah, really narrowing it down, nailing down your costs is huge. Aaron, I got one last question. We gotta wrap up here for time, but I got one last question. What are your three pillars of wealth creation?
That is a fantastic question. I know you ask everyone this, and it's a great question. So I would start in, maybe there's an order, maybe not, but I would definitely start with mindset as being the first pillar of wealth creation, right? You need to believe in what you're doing, even if,
Yeah,
you know, we all have imposter syndrome. You know, we all have moments where, you know, we just think, why am I doing this? What's, you know, how could I get into this? This is nuts. You know, I'm really going to do. You've got to be able to have a way in which you can address that, right?
yep.
And have the mindset to know that it's better to take action and really move what you're doing forward. But this, I mean, mindset is huge. So that could be a whole podcast, right? Like multiple
Yep.
podcasts, right? It's people that teach all about that. But that's
Yeah.
first one, mindset. Second is partnerships, right? And this is definitely something that I learned early on, and but also wasn't really practicing as much. As I mentioned, the first development, I did have some partners on. There were some issues with some of the partners, so you know that can be a challenge. But certainly, by partnering with the right people, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to move what you're doing forward much more quickly. and then also have more resources to do things, because
Yeah.
you can't do everything. So if you partner with people that help reinforce or provide other skill sets, right? You have one superpower, they've got another superpower. Combine the superpowers, and you've got a very powerful team. So I feel like that's really, really, really important. And I wish I would have created more partnerships early on, but I feel like it's been very helpful in the last couple of years. And then the third is to reinvest. So in what do we say about reinvesting? That we're talking about investing, right? So this is one of the cores of what we're talking about, is investing in real estate. So yes, of course, reinvesting does mean reinvesting your dollars in projects or your business. So it could be that kind of financial reinvestment, but also just reinvest in everything that you're doing. Reinvest in your mindset, right? Invest in your education, invest in other aspects of what you're doing. Take time to create, those types of investments. So there's, psychological investments also. And that's kind of like getting up in the morning and going to the gym. You're making an investment in your health. So there's everyone's got a list, right? What are your goals? What things do you need to spend on? And we can consider it spending time or spending money or spending other resources. Those are all investments. And the more you invest in yourself and in your business, you're gonna grow. There's no question about it.
I love thinking about investing beyond just the dollars, right? Because that's the go-to. You got to take those dollars, you got to put them somewhere, you got to invest them. That's the go-to. But if we think about investing as every aspect, if we take that money and we put it somewhere, it's going to bear interest. It's going to grow. We just need to start with a little bit, right? We start with a little bit and we continue to put a little bit in, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow into something big. The same thing happens when you invest in your health, when you invest in your family. If you just put a little bit in and you continue to put a little bit in, and it grows and it grows and it grows, eventually it becomes
Absolutely.
really, really awesome. So
watering your crops, we're both Midwestern guys, right? You see in the summer, there's nothing there, right? Or in the spring, there's nothing there, right?
Yeah.
The seeds are planted, and then by the end of the summer, the corn's 8-10 feet high. You can't even see past it. Like, how did it grow that quickly? Well, you can almost watch it grow. It's actually a fairly quick process. So we can think about, that's a real Midwestern analogy. Think about building a real estate business like growing corn, right? It can happen pretty quickly, and you can watch it before your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Aaron, last question, I guess, is how can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more about what you got going on?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for asking that. So you can navigate to designdrivesvalue.com. So it's just that URL, designdrivesvalue.com. Go there. We've got a white paper that you can download that talks about our design-driven development philosophy. And then you can reach out to us from there. I'd love to have conversations with anyone that's interested and would like to learn more about the types of developments that we're doing, and the projects that we're working on, or anyone that might be working on something. If anyone's got a question that I could be helpful in answering, want to share some experience, looking for advice, I'm happy to connect and have a conversation with anyone where there could be some value. And we also do have a focus, of course, we have a strong focus on design, but we're also highly motivated in focusing on sustainability and energy efficiency. So if anyone's working in that space as well, love to have a conversation, and I'd love to talk about those issues.
Awesome. Aaron, really appreciate your time and value being able to add to the show. You have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Todd. It was great being on.
Yeah. To our audience, make every day a Saturday. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to
more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.